What's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist Integrity doing a great double casted caster test hand video. So I'm really excited for this for you guys because this is actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Gloomba. And this deck is a really awesome deck that focuses around summoning out the boss monster, the Great Double Casted Caster, which is a really awesome boss monster that can actually OTK your opponent. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description for every single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. And definitely give Gloomba some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. So we're going to go ahead and pile shuffle the deck, because you guys know that is dad rule number one, that we got to pile shuffle the deck or we might brick, even with the most consistent decks. But this deck is super fun because it focuses around summoning out that double casted caster boss monster that can actually attack your opponent directly, which is just really cool. And when it attacks directly, you're just going to have an absolutely humongous monster because we're using normal ritual monsters to fusion summon it, and it gains the attack of the normal ritual monsters that you actually use to fusion summon it, which is really cool. So now that we got the deck pile shuffled, we're going to go ahead and give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we can do for our first test hand. So let's see what we can actually do. So we're going to draw a copy of Extra Foolish Burial, which is really good, a copy of the Masked Beast, a copy of Polymerization. We've already got set up with these three cards for our first copy of the Double Casted Caster, a copy of Curse of the Masked Beast, and finally a copy of Magical Eyes Fusion. We'd actually summon double casted caster, which is really cool. That'd actually be quadruple double casted caster, but I don't know. We're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Extra Foolish Burial by paying half of our life points. We can actually send from our extra deck to the graveyard a copy of Herald of the Arclight, which is then going to use its effect to be able to grab from our deck any ritual monster that we want, which is going to be super helpful because we're actually going to grab the Masked Beast. The Masked Beast is actually really cool in this deck because it's actually the highest attack point non-effect ritual monster in the entire game, still to this day sitting at 3,200. So at this point we're going to do a very simple play and go ahead and activate Polymerization to use both of these Masked Beasts in our hand to summon out our first copy of the Double Casted Caster, which will be sitting at right at 6,400 attack points, which is just absolutely insane. We're then going to use the copy of Magical Eyes Fusion to banish from our graveyard the two copies of the Masked Beasts that we have in the graveyard to summon out our second copy of the Double Casted Caster, which will come out right at about 6,400, just like your copy of your first one, which is really cool because this card has a super unique effect. Let's take a quick look at what this card actually does, because it's just really cool. It takes two non-effect monsters to summon out this really awesome boss monster. If you guys notice, there's eyes right there. There's actually two spellcasters in the same robe to look really tall, which is really funny. I really love this card, but it has the ability that it takes two non-effect monsters to fusion summon this card, and it gains attack equal to the combined original attack of any ritual, fusion, synchro, XZ, or link monster used to fusion summon into this card, which is really cool. It also has the ability that this card can attack directly, and if this card is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can target one of your non-effect monsters that's banished during the graveyard and special summon it. I wish it said ignore its summoning conditions, because then we could summon back our ritual monsters, which is really cool. But you usually want to go second in this deck, because if you establish both of these on the field and your opponent does not have a response, you can attack your opponent directly for 12,800, because these cards can attack directly, which is really fun. I really love this because you can actually summon these pretty consistently to your side of the field because of all the cards that we're playing in the deck. You can summon out two copies of the Double Casted Caster to be able to go in for game, which is really awesome. But that is going to do it pretty much for the first test hand, because the next card we're going to draw into is Zero Ritual. So basically you're focusing on summoning out both of these and going in for game. That's the main focus of the entire deck. Sometimes you will draw into some ritual monsters that you're going to try and ritual summon, which is really cool because we're playing some really old school ritual monsters like Zero the Mat, our copy of Magician of Black Chaos, and a copy of Masked Beast. These are really awesome in the deck because basically they're basically non-effect monsters that you can use to fusion summon into the double casted caster, because it's really hard to go into the other monsters that come out of the extract. I chose to actually focus around using the ritual monsters because they're a little bit easier to get to, and you can use cards like Allure of Darkness and trade in because all three of these monsters are level 8 and dark, which is really helpful for the deck. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can do for our next test. And if you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below. But let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next test hand. Even if you can only summon out one copy of the double casted caster, you usually can do about 6,000 damage to your opponent, which sometimes your opponent will pay life points during their turn, so you might actually get an OTK with just a single copy, which is really cool. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Zero the Mat, and Zero Ritual, which is funny because we only play a single copy of Zero Ritual, a copy of Extra Foolish Burial, Keeper of Dragon Magic, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to search from our deck to our hand, a copy of a Fusion Spell, and finally an Allure of Darkness, just to help us dig into the deck a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Extra Foolish Burial again to send from our deck to the graveyard a copy of Herald of the Arclight, which I actually think I shuffled one into the deck, which is kind of funny. I actually did shuffle one into the deck, so we're actually going to grab it from the extra deck. We're going to grab one from the extra deck, and then we're going to add from our deck to our hand any ritual monster that we want. So we're going to add a copy of the Masked Beast from our deck to our hand to be able to then fusion summon, because we have the Keeper of Dragon Magic. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon out the Keeper of Dragon Magic and use its ability to discard a card from our hand, which is going to be the Zero Ritual that we're going to discard from our hand to be able to add a Polymerization, which is going to be really good to be able to just add that Polymerization from our deck to our hand. Now, we're already set up for a copy of the double casted caster, but we're locked into fusion summoning from the extra deck, so we can't link summon. But let's go ahead and just take a peek and see what we would actually draw if we hit with the Allure of Darkness, which we would actually draw into a copy of Orthoscorpio and Magician's Soul, which is going to be really good because we can then use the copy of the let's use the copy of Orthoscorpio to be able to then, or actually Magician's Soul. Let's use Magician's Soul and banish that card to be able to use that allure. So now we're going to use the Polymerization in our hand to be able to fusion summon into the double casted caster, which is pretty good to be able to already get this card on our side of the field. Now it is sitting at a little bit less because you use the copy of Zero the Mat and the copy of the Masked Beast, but 6,000 is still really big to be able to summon this card out to your side of the field. It's really awesome because you're just 200 life points away from being an OTK, because this card is sitting at 1,800 and this is at 6,000, which is 7,800. That's a lot of damage that your opponent's taking off of these two cards, but the double casted caster can attack directly, which is really awesome. So when our opponent passes back to us, we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Magician's Soul, which at this point we can normal summon out the copy of Orthoscorpio, send from our hand to the graveyard the Magician's Soul to be able to special summon to our side of the field a copy of our Darling Cobra, which is really helpful to be able to grab that card and just put it on our side of the field. Now at this point, I'm actually going to grab a copy of Polymerization from my deck to my hand because it's going to help out a little bit more to grab Polymerization than it is going to be to grab Magical Eyes Fusion, because I want to summon out some other cards to my side of the field, because we have a couple of other fusion monsters that you can actually use in the extract, like your copy of Predaplant Chimera Flesia, and you have Starving Venom Fusion Dragon that you can actually summon by using your cards on your side of the field, which is really nice. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and link these two cards away to summon out a copy of Anaconda, which then I can pay 2,000 life points to send from my deck to the graveyard, a copy of Magical Eyes Fusion to then summon out an additional copy of a double casted caster by just banishing the copy of the Masked Beast and Zero the Mat from the graveyard, which is super cool that you can just basically banish these two from the graveyard and then immediately get that card on the field. These are actually new sleeves, so they're actually a little bit slippery, but you can actually use other cards that, like summon out the First of the Dragon if you want to, because it's a normal monster. It just requires normal monsters. And you can actually even summon out Guardian Chimera, which is really awesome if we draw into a monster next turn if we need it, which this card is also sitting at 6,000. which is really cool to be able to OTK the opponent. Now, if this still didn't get through to the opponent, we can just go ahead and draw for turn, which is going to be a pre-prep for rights that we can actually activate, and then add from our deck to our hand the Magician of Black Chaos and its ritual spell from our deck to our hand to be able to then go in for even more plays by using the Polymerization that we have in our hand, and then fusion summoning away the Keeper of Dragon Magic, Magician of Black Chaos, and the copy of the Predaplant Verte Anaconda to summon out Guardian Chimera to back up all of our plays, which is going to help out a lot because we use 2 monsters on the field. You can pop 2 cards, and we use 1 monster in the hand, so we can actually draw a card, which is Zira the Mat, which is really cool to then go in for game if you haven't already. Usually you would have already gone in for game with those plays, but just showing you guys that the deck does actually have follow-up plays, which is really, really cool. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next test hands. You guys can see the deck is pretty consistent at summoning out the double casted caster. It does break every so often, but that is just something that it comes up with a deck like this that you're going to run in sometimes with a brick like that in the deck. I really like actually using these sleeves because you can really tell the cards that are coming from the extra, because I use black sleeves for the extra deck on every one of my videos, but I am actually using these Magikaribo sleeves, which is really awesome sleeves. I really like these. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for our next test hand. And again, if you guys would like to check out the deck profile, it is down in the description down below. But let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for our next one. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Orthoscorpio, which is already really good, a copy of A Curse of the Masked Beast, a copy of Darling Cobra and Magician Souls, and finally, a copy of the Masked Beast. This is actually a pretty decent hand, because we're not going to use the Curse of the Masked Beast to be able to ritual summon. We're just going to use it with our copy of Magician Souls to be able to draw more cards. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon out the copy of our Orthoscorpio, sending from our hand to the graveyard the Darling Cobra to be able to summon out an additional copy of Darling Cobra from the deck, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to get the copy of Darling Cobra, because then we're going to search out a copy of Poly to hopefully go in for an additional fusion summon, which is going to help us out a lot. If we don't draw into anything with our copy of Magician Souls, you kind of pass over to the opponent, but you still have the copy of Polymerization that you can use with your other cards to be able to go in for a Guardian Chimera, which is pretty good. So now that we have this in our hand, let's go ahead and special summon out the copy of the Magician Souls that's in our hand by sending from our deck to the graveyard the Magician of Black Chaos, which is just really cool that you can play that card in the deck. Like, I love that card so much because it's so nostalgic that Yugi actually used that card to go in for game against Pegasus. That was just really awesome. But we're going to go ahead and use the effect of the Magician Souls to be able to send the Curse of the Masked Beast from our hand to the graveyard to hopefully draw into a copy of a ritual monster. Hopefully we do draw into a ritual monster, because if we draw into literally any ritual monster, we have our plays rolling. So we're going to draw into a copy of Trade-In. That's totally fine, because we can use it with our copy of Masked Beast to dig into the deck a little bit more, and we're going to hit a copy of Pre-Prep and a copy of the Masked Beast, which sets us up because we can use Pre-Prep to be able to search from the deck a copy of Magician of Black Chaos and its ritual spell to be able to grab that from the deck so we can go in for our plays. Now we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and we've already got set up for multiple plays with this setup, which is really, really nice because we have our ritual monsters in the graveyard and we have our ritual monsters in our hand. So we can go ahead and drop the copy of Polymerization to be able to go in for the double casted caster, and then we can link these 2 monsters away on our side of the field for a copy of our Anaconda, and then we can use the Anaconda to be able to go in for another play because we can use it to pay 2k, drop the copy of Magical Eyes Fusion from the deck, and then once you do, you can then go in for an additional copy of the double casted caster by banishing off your copy of Magician of Black Chaos and your copy of the Masked Beast, which is really cool that you can just immediately go in for that card and have the copy of Black Magic Ritual still on the field to go in later if we draw into a copy of the Magician of Black Chaos, or we can use it with Magician Souls to be able to send it to the graveyard to be able to go in for an additional draw. So at this point, both of these monsters are at 6,000, which is really awesome. that you can basically just go in for 12,000 per game if you're going second. If your opponent doesn't have a response to this, they're pretty much going to lose at this point, which is really cool. I really like decks like this that are just really fun to play with, that you pretty much just go in with these really weird boss monsters to be able to just go in for a game, because this is a really cool setup. To be able to summon out two 12,000 attack point monsters that can actually just attack directly, because they're gaining the 32 off the copy of the Masked Beast and the 28 from the copy of the Magician of Black Chaos, which is 6,000, which is what their attacks become, because that was the two materials that we used, which is just really awesome. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for one more test hand. Let's see if we can pull off some really awesome stuff. See if we can go in for another copy of the double casted caster. I will say, you usually don't ritual summon in this deck. You're pretty much just using the ritual spells to be able to use with Magician Souls, and using cards like your using your ritual monsters to be able to fusion summon into the double casted caster. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for another test hand. So now that we got the deck shuffled, we're going to see what we can pull off. We're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of the Masked Beast, a copy of the Black Magic Ritual, a copy of Trade-In, one copy of our Magician Souls, and a copy of Magician of Black Chaos. So we have some pretty good plays already set up. You can, if you really want to, you could activate the Black Magic Ritual and send the copy of Masked Beast and summon the Magician of Black Chaos, which would just be super nostalgic to be able to do, but it's not the optimal play. But what we're going to do is we're going to immediately activate our copy of Magician Souls to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard a copy of Magician of Black Chaos, to be able to get that card into the graveyard and then use the effect of our Magician on our side of the field to be able to send our copy of our Black Magic Ritual to the graveyard to be able to draw a card, which we're going to draw into a copy of our Magician of Black Chaos, which we're then going to use, we trade in our hand to be able to draw two more cards, and hopefully we get into a ritual monster, or not a ritual monster, a fusion spell, or another monster that we can normal summon, which we're actually going to get a polymerization and a lure, which is pretty good. And we actually might blind a lure with this hand, because we have the ability to get every card out of our hand. So we're going to go ahead and use these two cards in our hand to the graveyard to summon out the double casted caster, which will come out right at about 6k, because we use the Masked Beast and Magician of Black Chaos. And then we're going to go ahead and blind a lure for 2 and see what we get, which we're actually going to get a Curse of the Masked Beast and a polymerization, which are immediately going to go to the graveyard. But that's totally fine, because we did summon out one copy of the double casted caster, which we pass back over to the opponent, and if they can't really do anything, we're going to draw for a copy of Extra Foolish Burial, which we can activate if we want to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard an additional card like a Herald of Arclight. Or you can even send from your extract to the graveyard cards like your Wind Pegasus or Elder Entity Nist, which are really good cards to send from the extract to the graveyard. So that hand, you didn't get out 2 of them like all the other test hands, but that's totally fine, because we have summoned it out 3 of the 4 times. We've gotten double casted caster, which is really cool. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for one last test hand, see if we can pull off a really insane one. Which, keep in mind, we're not pile shuffling in between each test hand. So you guys make sure that you are pile shuffling in between each test hand. I'm showing you guys what the deck can do if you're just playing between round and round and round with this deck, and see what you can actually do. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for one more test hand. We're going to draw into a copy of Pre-Prep of Rites, which is really good. A copy of Polymerization. If we draw any ritual monster, we already have it. A copy of Trade-In. A copy of Allure of Darkness. And finally, a copy of Extra Foolish Burial. So we can actually do a lot of stuff. We can draw 4 cards in this hand, which is really cool. But let's go ahead and activate the copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites to be able to grab from our deck to our hand a copy of the Masked Beast and its ritual spell, which is going to help us out a lot because we already have our first ritual monster in hand. So we're going to shuffle up the deck and see what else we can do with this hand, because we have Extra Foolish Burial that we can then activate in our hand to be able to then dig into the deck to get even more cards. We're going to send a Herald of Arclight to be able to grab from the deck a copy of the Masked Beast, which then we're going to shuffle up the deck and see what else we can do. So at this point, you could just summon out a single copy of the double casted caster using these 3 cards in your hand. But if we wanted to keep going, we can go ahead and use the copy of trade-in to be able to draw 2 more cards, which gets us a Magicalized Fusion and a Keeper of Dragon Magic, which then we can use Allure of Darkness to draw 2 more cards. And if it's a ritual monster, we get double casted caster, which is Magicalized Fusion. And we got it. We got a Magician of Black Chaos, because we're just going to be able to banish from our hand the copy of Keeper of Dragon Magic, because we don't need the card, use the copy of Poly, and then use it with the 2 ritual monsters that we have in the hand to be able to summon out our first double casted caster at 6,000. And you can make another one. It's not really necessary to be able to make one with 2 copies of the Masked Beast. So we're just going to make one right here for 6,000 with Magicalized Fusion. And depending on what we draw, you can actually go in for another copy of it because you have the second copy of Magicalized Fusion, but it does require the monsters to be used from the field, which is the only downside to this card if you don't have the monsters. So we're going to go ahead and summon out our second copy using Magicalized Fusion at 6,000 attack points, which is pretty good, and I really like that. That's really awesome to be able to summon that card. We're going to draw into a copy of Darling Cobra on the following turn, so you don't really have any more plays that you're going to go in for. 0 Ritual, and then a copy of Keeper of Dragon Magic, which is not going to help us out all that much, but you still had some really good plays because you summoned out 2 copies of the double casted caster. So I think that pretty much shows how to play this deck. This deck is super fun. It's pretty simple to play because basically what you're doing is using the ritual monsters to be able to go in for your double casted caster, which is really cool, especially being able to use the old school nostalgic boss monsters like the Magician and your copy of Masked Beast, and even the copies of Zera the Mat, because those are really actually the most powerful normal ritual monsters in the game, which is kind of neat. And I really like that you can use those old school boss monsters from duel monsters. That's just really awesome. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.